Welcome everyone to our free Pay It Forward Mercury Retrograde webinars. As you can see on your screen here, we have a Mercury Retrograde coming up December 29th through January 18th. Mercury is going to go retrograde at 24.5 Capricorn all the way back to 8 degrees Capricorn. More on this in just a moment, but first of all, I'm going to see if I get my screen going. Here's our little bookkeeping slide. When you get the PDF afterwards, these blue hyperlinks, you can click on them and they'll take you specifically to certain pages of our website. And as Leroy was mentioning earlier, we're recording this December 28th, the day before Mercury retrograde, and exactly 1 week from now on January 4th, I will do my annual forecast for 2023. And so you can click on this hyperlink if you would like to register for this webinar. I've been in midst of prepping it already, and we have 3 planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Aquarius, all ingressing into new signs, as well as the nodal axis doing a new ingress. So lots of activity for 2023. However, going forward with Mercury retrograde, here are the dates for you to see. So you can see the pre-shadow, the actual retrograde dates and degrees again, and then of course the post-shadow of Mercury, making those 3 passages. I will go through my repeating slides pretty fast tonight and just slow down for when we have information specific to this Mercury retrograde cycle. So thank you for understanding that. Now, Mercury is in Capricorn for 2 months of this year, or 2 months, excuse me, one sign. I'm trying to do too many things here. Mercury can go as fast as 2 weeks, or a little less than that, going through a sign of the zodiac. So when it has a retrograde in one sign, it slows down to have a 2-month passage through that sign. That is like a forever in Mercury time. And so these Capricorn themes we're going to discuss here this evening are very strong. They're with us for an entire 2 months. And here were 2 of the themes that stuck out for me, because the polarity of Capricorn is Cancer. This passage through Capricorn with its retrograde is going to have us learning to evolve our outer reality with whatever our inner emotional desires are. We're going to be balancing that Cancer Capricorn polarity, which we'll speak to in future slides as well. But I also want to say that we're going to be reviewing Pluto's 15-year transit through Capricorn. Pluto went into Capricorn in 2008, if you remember, when we had that financial decline as it moved from Sag to Capricorn. And so, this is a long transit for Pluto. And Mercury, over this 2-month time period, can be doing a review of all of these Pluto Capricorn themes. We'll touch on a few of these as we go through some specific slides here throughout our presentation. But let's just jump right in with the Mercury stationary retrograde chart. Again, it goes retrograde December 29th at 4:32 a.m. in Washington, D.C. I always like to use 0 Aries as the ascendant. So this chart is generic for all of us, no matter where across the northern North America or in the world we may be. These are the planetary alignments when Mercury goes stationary retrograde. As you can see over here on the left side of your screen, Mercury has been busy making 3 different conjunctions to Venus. September in Virgo, November in Sag, and now Mercury conjuncts Venus right after it turns stationary retrograde on the 29th, on the exact minute that Mercury turns stationary retrograde. So this puts the strong theme of Venusian values to this Mercury retrograde. And so all of us can be pondering right now, what is of the most value to us in our life? Let's take a moment and look at where you're at. And, here's Mercury turning stationary retrograde a few days before our calendar year shifts. And so those traditional New Year's goals that some of us make, Mercury retrograde is going to line up to really review what that is for us with Venus. And then therefore, through its 3 weeks of retrograde, how are we going to put these goals, Capricorn word as well here, into actions? Now, I think that this Mercury-Venus conjunction will also have us re-evaluating our relationship to resources, Capricorn. Resources, actual money. What is our budget or our monetary goals as we look forward into 2023? What's our relationship with our career if we still have one? And I think a very strong theme for us as Pluto is finishing up its transit through Capricorn is, what is our relationship to the material world? Do we find security via that outer stuff, Mercury, Venus, and Pluto? Or are we learning with Mercury retrograde in Capricorn to really value non-material things, value being safe, value in inner peace, valuing having, food, clothing, and shelter in our world through this major storm that we just had? These are themes to be reflecting upon right now and throughout this Mercury retrograde cycle. I also just want to briefly point out, I didn't take time. I've got to get a Eris ephemeris. I've not worked a lot with Eris, but it keeps coming up. And so here I am, Mercury retrograde, setting my intentions to get a handy dandy Eris ephemeris. We have Venus and Mercury, even Pluto in last quarter squares to Eris retrograde at about 24 degrees Aries. And as I reflected on those today, I thought last quarter, crises in consciousness, last quarter square aspect and that phase, the crises in consciousness are beliefs. And so where are we wanting to break free from old patriarchal values and ideas? And where is consensus consciousness that approximately 7 out of 10 souls on the planet, any race, any continent, etc., where is the consensus world wanting to maintain these patriarchal distortions, the traditional male-female roles, etc., because it allows us to feel secure? And there can be some shakeups going on of all of the old patriarchal orders that are no longer working on an evolving planet that is bringing us more and more extreme climate events. The shifts are going to continue to happen, and they can be intensified every year at this time when the inner planets are moving through Capricorn and making these squares to Eris. And so there's like a, energetic and physical battle going back and forth between letting go of these distortions or clinging to them. And quite frankly, natural spiritual laws and principles, which are always observed through nature, will have the last word. And I think that the Uranus North Node conjunctions in Taurus will have all of us looking at, how do I find inner security in my life that then works to create outer security in my world? How are my belief systems evolving on deep emotional levels on the planet as we look at the changes taking place in our world? There are none of us who will be escaping climate change, however, we may find ourselves in the midst of it. Now, every time I have a Mercury chart, I am putting in the USA chart. Thank you, international listeners. I come from the perspective of a United States astrologer. I think it's been a couple of years now since I shifted over to the July 4th chart of Michael Munkesi of 9:37 a.m. on July 4th, 1776. And here is a link to an article that recaps his research that I kind of have put into these couple of sentences for you. It gives the US a Virgo rising, and it makes us a fifth house Pluto. And this egotistical, exceptionalist nature of the United States just really rings for me with this chart having a US fifth house Pluto or Leo soul for our country, and how we're, especially as Pluto transits into Aquarius, needing to be one of the players and not going around thinking we're king of the or queen of the planet in our egocentrism. Is that a word? Who knows? Anyway, I will use this chart periodically. The aspects will be true for any July 4th chart, even if you use a different one and change the houses. And so what I find with Mercury turning stationary retrograde, as you can see, there's a lot of aspects going on right now, in addition to Mercury going retrograde exactly opposite by 1 minute, not 1 degree, 1 minute to the July 4th natal Mercury retrograde natally in Cancer. And so this is a very, very strong Mercury retrograde for the USA and even for us. What are we going to be throwing off on a left brain consensus level as a group of people? Now, on the day that Mercury goes retrograde, December 29th, that is also the third and final conjunction of transiting Pluto to the natal USA Pluto at 27.5 degrees Capricorn. After the 29th, Pluto is new phase to the USA Pluto. It will not retrograde back to balsamic phase. It's going to go on into Aquarius for 3 months this year, and we are now going to be finishing out the rest of this decade and moving into the following decade as a country with Pluto, new phase Pluto, and all of the new beginnings that we will be making as a collective group of people, willingly or unwillingly. I keep thinking of the fact that after the USA midterm elections last November, the Democrats kept the majority in the Senate, which doesn't typically happen, and the Republicans have a very, very slim majority in the US House. And I keep thinking of the fight for the Speaker of the House that is going to take place next week in Congress, as Mercury is stationary retrograde opposing itself, and just that battle back and forth of who gets the Capricorn power and control going on here, and Mercury retrograde stirring the pot and mixing things up, adding on to the fact that we have this Mars retrograde cycle still going on. It doesn't go direct till January 12th at 8 degrees Gemini, smack dab on the USA Uranus in Gemini. And that can create all of this truth versus lies energy that we can see that's been taking place. This feeds into the fact that Neptune in Pisces has just finish up its oppositions to itself in Virgo, and it will make the 5th of 5 last quarter squares to natal Mars here in just a few more days, mid-January. I can't remember the date in January when that's going to happen. You can see the tightness of what's going on here. And so this intensity that I spoke about here, in the fact that the natal USA chart, Mercury retrograde opposing Pluto retrograde, Sun in Cancer square the Saturn in Libra, the Mars in Gemini square the Neptune in Virgo. These 3 sets of aspects just point to the USA having these inclusive versus exclusive time periods as a country, as a collective group. All this is activated, by Neptune's transit, by the Mars retrograde, by the Pluto conjunctions, and now by the Mercury retrograde. So I think that it'll be a pretty, it could be an intense January here in this country. Will we see more mass shootings? Will we see that political divide in this country? I don't see it ending in the near future. I think that we're finally starting to see some broad waves of the masses starting to say, wait a minute, can we just get back to some Capricorn common sense ideals and practicalities? And can we just come together and take care of ourselves as a group rather than having all of this intense fighting? I think some of this is also relating to the fact that when you use the 9:37 a.m. chart for July 4th, you have the moon come in at 22.5 degrees Aquarius, and Saturn has been making 3 conjunctions over this moon. I'll show you the dates here in future slides. And so, again, just an evolving public awareness around gender issues, Moon Saturn, around reproductive rights, Moon Saturn, around extremist views, and the tiredness of bold-faced lies, Mars retrograde in Gemini. So Mercury retrograde is going to review all of this. We'll see where we are by the time we get to the latter part of January, and we have Mars, Mercury, and Uranus all go stationary direct this month. More on that going forward. So I also, though, just want to say something about Mercury retrograde in the calendar year of 23. Mercury retrograde cycles reverse through the elements, and the Mercury retrogrades in 23, as you can see down here on your screen, all take place in Earth element, except for the last Mercury retrograde, the end of 23, which then goes from Capricorn back to Sag. What happens is this puts Mercury in the element of Earth, Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo for 7 months of 2023. This is really going to almost slow down communications. It will have us really lean towards being physical, practical, earth-orientated. How are we going to take care of ourselves in our relationship to resources? How are we going to pay attention to these earth events and climate changes that are going on? We're going to see a lot of energy and communications just around that whole element of earth, simplifying things down. Mercury doing the prioritization. I will say that as Mercury spends 7 months in Earth signs, during those time periods, look it up in your ephemeris if you need to. During those time periods, we have to have patience with communications. Because when Mercury goes into the earth element, it's going to need time to process, to physically process with the synapses in our brain what we're thinking before we can then communicate them verbally or in written word. So Mercury in air signs, Mercury in fire signs, just rattling it all up. But when Mercury goes into earth and water, again, we have to practice patience with our communications. And Mercury retrograde in the earth element, we've got to be willing to communicate things more than once to get to the essence of what any communications mean. Now, planetary retrogrades happen from our perspective here on Earth. They are all going around the sun. They just appear to slow down and go backwards from our geocentric perspective. And from the perspective of Mercury on planet Earth, it never gets more than 29 degrees away from the sun. That's why your Mercury sign is always the sign before, the same, or the sign after your sun sign, because it can never get any further away than 29 degrees from our perspective on Earth. Now, here's a visual for you of what a Mercury retrograde would look like in the sky if you sat out there every night, which, by the way, all of our visible planets are in the nighttime skies right now, from Mercury retrograde with Venus just becoming an evening star going across the skies to Jupiter, Saturn, Mars. We're cold up here, so I don't spend a lot of time outdoors looking at the evening stars compared to how I do it in July, but you can sure get out there and look if you want to in your more temperate climates. This is the outer side of Mercury with its rulership of Gemini in third house. If you're new to EA and my webinars, you can pause your PDF or pause your YouTube video and look at this stuff a little more detailed if you need to. And of course, Mercury retrograde in general tries to slow things down and shift us from left brain to right brain, namely Gemini points to Sag and Virgo points to Pisces. It's two signs of rulership. And so how do we find quiet time in the busyness of a Mercury retrograde when it intensifies all the details that we have to pay attention to? Taking a breath. Taking a breath and honoring what I like to call the Capricorn compressions. Depression and involution are a natural part of the Capricorn archetype in evolution. And they happen when our outer realities and circumstances no longer serve our soul. And so when Mercury goes retrograde in Capricorn, it's going to create these turning inwards for us. So try not to judge yourself if you go through feeling bummed out or depressed or wanting to be alone, because it's natural. And it takes us to that Cancer polarity to have emotional reflection so we can become aware of what the inner dynamics and motivations are that create our reality. And if we don't like that reality, then we ask that inner question, why? And what do I have to change inwardly in order to then change my outer world? Now, when we go through these Capricorn compressions starting inward, we still have to brush our teeth. We still have to put gas in the car if we own a vehicle. We still have to put one foot in front of another with however it is we need to maintain our life. However it is, we need to make any necessary changes Capricorn will want us to cling to the old patterns for security. And this is sometimes why we have those retrograde cycles here on Earth. It brings out that energy to throw off the past. And Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, it wants to throw off old mental patterns that have us clinging to old realities and securities that no longer serve us. Now, nothing in astrology is 100% positive or 100% negative, very rare. So it's not always bad. So if we've been making an effort to be in touch with our world, Mercury retrograde can create many opportunities for us to really move forward on a deep soul growth level. Pluto, Capricorn, to make those career changes, to have whatever familial healings we may find ourselves in the middle of, to create resource stabilities, to create the new realities and structures that we want to see in our world. Just remember, for every goodbye, there's a hello. Every ending opens up space for new beginnings. Use Mars direct to make better choices, Gemini, for you, and use Mercury retrograde to throw off those old thought patternings that you cannot do it. What is it in your immediate reality for you to have the power to change? Now, a little more specifically, Mercury retrograde in Capricorn is a mental review of our soul structure of consciousness. Saturn rules Capricorn, that creates every manifested form in our world. So there's a need again for that self-reflection on all those outer forms. What's no longer working? What do we desire to change? What are our inner motivations to action? What is it that makes us do what we do? How can we change? How can we do it differently? Again, Mercury, Mars, and Uranus is really going to give us some momentum to change our world this next month if we want to. Now, one more time, that weariness or depression, that's just telling us something needs to change. So what doesn't work and how do we change it? We also will have to review all our judgments that are based upon standards of right, wrong conduct. If you marry same gender, bad guy, bad girl, who's making that standard of right, wrong conduct? Mercury retrograde in Capricorn throws off. It brings into clear consciousness all of the consensus societal standards of right, wrong that are out of touch with what we would call nature and natural laws. And again, natural spiritual laws and principles are found through nature. You don't need a book, you don't need a person, and you don't need a place, as Jeffrey Green would say, to tell you not to put the baby on the Autobahn. Don't drop the baby off in the middle of the highway. Not a very nice thing to do for baby. So we are all going to be reviewing what is a standard of right, wrong conduct for ourselves on an individual basis, for coming from our own sense of natural law and what works for us. And this is the time period to shake it up and change it if we want to. This is also a time period to have serious conversations around our career or careers over, if you're two people in your 30s and 40s and you're raising a family and you both work, well, who's going to have what chores around the house? How are you going to help and support each other with your different careers? Who's going to do the dishes? Who's going to make the food? Who's going to, take care of the bank accounts? Serious conversations around gender issues in its many, many varied forms. How about gender equality? The USA Supreme Court taking away a female right to abortion when almost 70% of the public in the US is supportive of it, did create some turnout with the midterm voting. Women want the right to be in charge of their own bodies, and they want that right to carry or not carry a child to be a very personal decision between them and their health provider. So Mercury retrograde is going to continue this kind of stuff in the news. Stay tuned. We'll see how it comes about. You will see it in your life in various ways. We'll also have all kinds of family situations that can arise for us. If any of you have been following our new moon, full moon free podcasts, Media Monk's 89-year-old mother has stabilized. She's going downhill. She has stage 4 kidney disease. Stage 5 is dialysis, which I don't know if she would be a candidate or if she would choose. She also has congestive heart failure, the issue of fluid in the lungs, broke both hips in the last year and a half, so there is but she is, as I've been joking, she's a cat with 9 lives and she's on life number 14. So amazingly, she has stabilized and has even been able to see a little bit of gratitude for her situation and even for her children. So we'll all have personal little things going on with our own families of origin that will come up with Mercury retrograde in Capricorn pointing towards Cancer. What is my role? What is mine to be responsible for? What am I not responsible for? And how do I stand up for healthy boundaries there? We're also going to be reviewing our efforts to self-determine our world. In other words, that discipline to take charge of our own life and not blame society, not blame the partner, not blame the kid, the parent, the job, the part of the country we live in, or whatever. How do we mature? Capricorn, how do we take charge of our own life? How do we put one step in front of another and go forward however we are meant to at this point in space-time? And so that whole maturation process that we're all going through when the planets move through Capricorn, Mercury retrograde says, oh, here's the feedback. So what do others have to say to us during Mercury retrograde? Oh, you want to release weight? New Year's goal? Well, pretty simple. More exercise, less calories. Somebody may have you to want to give you some feedback with your whole work attitude. How well can you listen to what others are saying to you? Where do you feel the need to speak up and say something to somebody else in your life? Mercury retrograde is communicate, 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 and say it again and again and again until all parties involved in the communication reach some sense of clarity or maybe agree to disagree if we cannot find common ground. So again, feedback here, Mercury retrograde. And in Capricorn, someone's going to want to have the last word. Someone's going to want to be in charge. Someone's going to want to have the control in order to feel secure. Can you go to that Cancer polarity and be inwardly secure and allow that outer world to change? Mercury retrograde is about flexibility. So, this Mars retrograde in Gemini has required us to be flexible. And as it slows down and goes direct, it's requiring us to make choices. And Mercury retrograde is going to ask us to make choices with our material world. There's needs and there's wants. I want a nice 3-week vacation in Europe. Well, I don't actually have the resources to afford that, and I probably need to make some car repairs to my vehicle. So Mercury can help us make choices. Again, think of those conjunctions to Venus. What's valuable for us? The Venus will be a part of the decisions we make through this Mercury retrograde. We're going to probably see some broader cycles here around the world where we're all noticing a need to conserve money, to conserve resources. We all may be having to spend more money on our food budgets. And so less money will go towards clothing or the want of a vacation and time off. So we're all going to be prioritizing, how we relate with the world. And we're going to see this in collective cycles as well. Now, that Cancer polarity that Mercury retrograde points to, we've got to go inward and have inner security on an emotional, mental level. One more time, regardless of what's going on in our outer world. So, if you're familiar with the teachings of Abraham by Esther Hicks, how do you reach for a better feeling thought? Wouldn't it be nice if I could do just a little better job at utilizing the food that I buy and throwing away less? So the Cancer polarity says we've got to internalize security versus always going for more, more, more. Some of us will have emotional shocks that will be part of helping us mentally review what happened, why it happened. It's going to evolve our self-image, how we see ourselves in relationship to others. Squares to Aries and Libra. How we see ourselves in relation to the world. How am I going through my maturation process? If I'm in my 60s and 70s, how am I making peace with my autumn stage of my life? I'm not the spring chicken anymore. I can't do things with my body that I could do at 20. How am I making peace with that? Is my self-image comfortable with my aging process? Capricorn, it is literally the physical aging process and mortality. Cancer polarity, we have to feel our way through any crystallized mental patterns that are not working or that we're simply tired of. I'm tired of the mental attitude that I barely have enough to survive. I need to feel differently about my relationship with money and resources. I have to change it inwardly to change it outwardly. And of course, when we go inward through that Cancer polarity, it allows us to emotionally reflect upon all those inner dynamics, our emotional relationship to this and that, and him and her and everything that creates that outer world. And one more time, we'll all have family issues that will come up through this retrograde cycle that we have to address. And can we find the way to love someone rather than look for more stuff? Now, I have this slide in here a couple of times. The Cancer Capricorn polarity is anima animus, or female male. And so as Mercury goes retrograde through Capricorn, pointing to Cancer, If we are in a female body, how do we balance our inner male? How do we find our courage to initiate? If we are in a male body, how do we balance it with our inner female? How do we honor those emotions and feelings that come up within us? Evolution on a soul level is being able to balance that anima animus, regardless of what gender we find ourselves in. There are those who will choose to go through gender transitions in any given lifetime. Can we reflect upon why we were born as a male in this life? Or why we were born as a female in this life? You know, it's just not a random chromosome happening. The process of reincarnation brings a larger understanding to why any soul chooses to come through male or female. And it's greatly missed in consensus society conversations with its denial of reincarnation. It's why we have so much distortions of judgments. Something to reflect on. Judge less, discern more, and allow everyone the freedom to choose as is highest and best for them in the moment. There's a Mercury retrograde Capricorn possibility. Now, this Mercury retrograde happens to be pretty fast. Evolutionary astrology works with the 360-degree cycle of phases and aspects. Here is this slide for you if you've never seen this. First from Dane Rudier, then Jeffrey Green. I adapted it a little bit more to this is how we look at it here at the Evolutionary Astrology Network. Here's all the Mercury retrograde aspects. 3 different aspects to Venus. And Mercury makes waning aspects to every single planet except Jupiter. And it finally makes a conjunction to Pluto after its retrograde cycle. If you saw Mercury stationary retrograde 24.5 Capricorn, Pluto was at 27.5 Capricorn. Mercury is a balsamic conjunction, balsamic phase to Pluto. And then again, it has aspects to the nodal axis as well. Let me briefly go through these for you. But before that, here's Mercury's interior conjunction to the Sun, which happens at 17 degrees Capricorn, just a few hours after the full moon on January 7th. And the full moon of Cancer has a tendency to usually come after Christmas because, you know, the winter solstice is December 20th, 21st. Christmas is the 25th. The sun's usually at 4, 5, 6 degrees Capricorn. So that full moon of Cancer tends to come after Christmas. And yes, Christianity overlaid the birth of Jesus on the winter solstice because the pagans wouldn't stop worshiping the winter solstice. You can research all that for yourself if you don't know the stories. But the full moon of Cancer is going to bring out these gender issues again for all of us. It can bring out the career issues. Everything that we've mentioned so far will be emphasized emotionally with this full moon. When that full moon happens after the holidays, it can emphasize emotional depression. This is I have a tendency to say that this is typically one of the hardest full moons to go through because that moon in sensitive Cancer, its own sign, is having to deal with all of the Capricorn outer realities. And all the routines come back after Christmas, after New Year's, when we typically, you know, get a little time off if we're lucky enough to have a white collar job or work Monday through Friday. You know, that routine coming back in January, it can be a letdown. And so it's going to be very important that we have a rich emotional life, full moon in Cancer, so that we can be at peace with the realities of our outer worlds, the family we miss, or the familial upsets that went on, or the Christmas bonus that didn't come, whatever. Now we will also have, with the interior conjunction, these trines to Capricorn. We have Mercury Sun making waning trines to Uranus, Uranus waxing trines to Pluto. Just in general, these trines, prior resource efforts come to fruition. You know, we get a surprised gift from an elderly parent, or the financial realities can hit. With inflation, we overextended our Christmas budget. We spent too much money. Oh, why did I do that? I really didn't need to buy that gift for XYZ. They can go either way. Typically, the manifestations will be based upon prior efforts, and this can include prior mental efforts. One of the things that I really like in my family of origin is many years ago, we stopped buying Christmas gifts. The elderly give Christmas money. We are to the point where we still have some little ones. And so I actually asked the parents of my 6-year-old great nephew, do I need to buy him a gift, or is he old enough for a gift certificate? The gift certificate is fine. Oh, it made it so sweet and easy to just give the resource of cash and then allow them to buy something they want for themselves. And so again, this can be that shifting of our mental attitudes around resources and around gifting over the holidays. And the other thing I like about both sides of our family with Leroy and I, his family does no gift giving at all. They are all about the food and making German cabbage rolls, Birk. And we have had two kitchen episodes, and we're going to have a third one because we have more family members coming home for Christmas Eve. And so it's joining around the Christmas table and laughing, joking, drinking, and making and eating German cabbage rolls. And so I love that part of his family where it's like, nah, we don't have to do the gift giving part. So again, these Taurus Capricorn trines, there can be ease or there can be upsets. If there are upsets, it's to reflect and say, how do I do it different? How do I do it different? Now, here's the Mercury retrograde interior conjunction to the sun, January 7th. Mars is slowing down, getting ready to go direct January 12th, right on the USA natal Uranus in Gemini. It's in the 9th house in the Munchausen chart. The intensity of split opinions and beliefs in this country. The interior conjunction has an opposition to the USA Cancer Sun and a square to the Saturn and Libra. More of the split opinions, the inclusive versus exclusive opinions around everything. But we also have January 3rd, just a few days before the interior conjunction, Saturn in Aquarius making the third and final conjunction to the USA moon, the court of public opinion and the public masses. and I have said this before, and I think it's still valid. There's an evolving public awareness around all of these Capricorn issues, around all of these Moon Saturn issues, Cancer with the Moon, gender issues, reproductive rights, this awareness of the extremist views, and almost a public emotional weariness of it, and a sparking of what I would say and hope would be that Aquarian fairness. You know, the interior conjunction opposite that Sun in Cancer, square that Saturn in Libra. Are we going to include or exclude? I mean, I think the debate's going to continue for a while, but I hope that there is a majority of public opinion who starts to realize, wait a minute, we've got to learn how to get along together and help our neighbor. And this could be some of the deeper things going on with Neptune, okay, just off of its last opposition to itself and its last square of 5 to Mars. There's still going to be a religious divide, but slowly but surely, I think evolution is happening. Again, the USA midterms gave me some reason for hope that we will learn how to get along with ourselves. Here are the dates again, that you just
Kim,
for a little, yes?
I just thought this would be a good time to insert a question that came through the board from Christiana. She wanted to know a little bit more about the gender switching thing with Cancer and Capricorn, why some souls do not relate to the body they are born into. Is it because they speed up evolution or anticipate,
Nope,
the next
nope,
gender?
nope, 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 nope. In Jeffrey Green's teachings, he had the way he would tell it, it's like buying a pair of blue jeans. When you buy a new pair of blue jeans, they can be a little stiff and not always comfortable to wear. But as you wash and wear that pair of blue jeans, and you wash them and you wear them and you wash them and wear them, they get more and more comfortable. And, eventually they can become your favorite pair of jeans and they're your go-to and you want to wear them all the time. But eventually they start to wear out. I know it's fashionable to have holes in your jeans right now, but eventually they get so well worn and, you can't wear them anymore. They're falling apart and you got to go buy a new pair of blue jeans. Well, this is what we do lifetime after lifetime in genders, and especially in that consensus, approximately 7 out of 10 souls. We get comfortable incarnating lifetime after lifetime in a specific gender, whichever one. But eventually, our soul reaches a limit in its evolution and what it can learn in that gender. And it's necessary to shift to the opposite gender. Well, if we've been coming through as a male for the last 10 lifetimes, and now we've come through as a female, it will be foreign. We won't relate to being a female. We will want to be a male. And some of us will then decide, I want to take the hormones. I want to go through the surgery. I want to be male because that's what I relate to. And because in consensus societies, most of them, we do not have a philosophy of reincarnation. We don't have the deeper understanding that can say to that soul, well, why were you born female this lifetime? These strange identities, this inability to relate as a female, what does it mean for you? Can you go back far enough to the lifetimes when you were female? Were you persecuted? Were you punished? Were you, did you suffer so much as a female? Your soul said, that's it, I'm going to be a male. So you come through as a male and you come through as a male. But again, you can flip these genders around and tell the same story the opposite way. You lifetimes as a female and all of a sudden you've come through as a male. What happens as souls expand in consciousness from consensus to individuated, approximately 2 out of 10 souls, to spirituating, approximately 1 out of 10 souls, any continent, any race. As we expand in consciousness, that ability to then start to honor our inner male, inner female, no matter what gender we are, allows us to then start to move back and forth between our male and female genders easier and easier and easier. We naturally, as souls, all go through the time periods of what we will call homosexuality. I remember specifically asking Jeffrey this question at a conference back in the 90s. And I said, what is the purpose of homosexuality? And he said, in the broadest sense, it's to learn to love a soul first and a body second. And so there's also then that process, in addition to wearing out the gender lessons and having to shift genders, there's also the issue of running into a soul that we know from the past, that we deeply, deeply love. We've loved them before, we run into them, we love them again, and we don't care what gender they are. That's part of that picture too. And then as we are expanding in consciousness, and as our soul is able to hold the inner male when female, as we can hold the inner female when we're male, then eventually the soul starts to become more and more and more androgynous. And you have the avatar, you have the evolved soul, such as Yogananda. He was, he's a modern example because we have pictures of him, and you look at him, is he male or is he female? He's been learning to hold the androgyny and balance of both his inner male and inner female within his soul. So that's the broad answer to that. And coming from that perspective, you can see how societal standards of right, wrong conduct can be so judgmental and so ignorant, when being able to hold the unconditional love. Neptune in Pisces opposing that natal Neptune, squaring that Mars in Gemini, the duality of the genders, being able to hold that unconditional love, transiting Neptune in Pisces, for all souls, and giving any specific soul the freedom to love as it wants to love, the freedom to learn as it wants to learn. If a soul's been coming through a certain gender for so many lifetimes and it's having to switch over for evolutionary reasons to learn and evolve, and it's too much, and it chooses to go back to being that old gender, it can take a lifetime or two to shift over and become comfortable in that new gender. Again, the blue jeans that have to be washed 2, 3, 4, 5 times before they're comfortable. Can we allow them the freedom to do that? It's their journey, and their soul gets to do it as fast as or as slow as they want. It's the beauty in natural law. All right, good question. Any other questions? Pop them on the board, raise your hand, Media Monk. You're always welcome to interrupt me. I'm a good rattler, rattling away, but I don't mind questions at all.
Thank you.
So I said yes. I said Mercury makes 3 aspects to Venus, 1 each. And so it had those 3 conjunctions over the fall. And now Mercury is actually going to fall behind, become balsamic phase to Venus. And Mercury and Venus can get as much as 60 degrees away from each other, maybe 62, 63, I don't remember exactly. But they go from new phase to crescent phase, and they go from balsamic to last quarter phase with each other. Mercury never opposes Venus. Now, They always have aspects during the retrograde cycle. I already spoke about the conjunction, the third one, as it turns retrograde. You know, what we may experience here is a little bit of doubt. And that's going to then, as we've been speaking, cause us to review what is of most value to us in our life. And it'll be all of the Cancer Capricorn themes that we talked about. So as Mercury falls behind Venus into that balsamic phase, it goes back to that aspect. It's necessary to be quiet. It's balsamic phase, okay? Mercury has to quiet down to deeply hear. And it's going to want to hear on an inner level with that Cancer polarity and balsamic phase. And it's going to instinctively want to control. It may not want to listen, but to the degree that Mercury can slow down and ask, what's important? What do I value? How do I find meaning? To the degree that it can do that on an inward level, it will give it that inner courage to make whatever changes it wants. And our mind can align with our value system. And we operate in sync on a very personal level. Now, Mercury's waning to Mars with 3 inconjuncts, 210-degree aspects. The inner inconjunct, 150 degrees, is inner adjustments and crises. The 200-degree inconjunct is outer adjustments and crises. Outer means people in society coming at us. And so Mercury retrograde is going to have to intuit, retrograde, when to make a stand with these outer adjustments, people, situations, and when we need to acquiesce, when we need to listen, when we need to adjust to what someone else is needing or asking in order to find that common ground or balance in situations and relationships. Now, with Mars finishing up the retrograde cycle in Gemini, it's going to emphasize communication themes. You see where we already had that first date in early December. You see where the retrograde in conjunct is sandwiched right in between Mars direct, Mercury direct. So this can be a time period right in here during this middle week in January where people, situations may just appear to come up and out of the blue that, oh, how do I balance here? How do I balance there? How do I adjust to this? How do I adjust to that? You know, example again with, you know, Leroy's mom, you know, we never know when the next visit to the ER is going to be. We never know when her next hospital stay is going to be. And all of a sudden our schedule has just turned topsy-turvy again with having to address issues with mom and her end of life situations. So we can all have something come up, and it can, you know, be with a partner, it can be with work, who knows, it can be all over the place. Mars direct wants to make choices, Gemini, the duality. Mercury retrograde says, oh, wait a minute, I really want to think about this, Capricorn, I really want to think about this. Oh, is this the best way to do it? Oh, do I have the courage to do that? Oh, gosh. Well, Mars direct, Mercury direct, yes, this is what we're going to do. This is what's gelling. This is how it is starting to come together for us. Now, Mercury makes waning aspects to Saturn, and look at this. Saturn rules Capricorn. It's moved on to Aquarius, but it rules Capricorn. The sign Mercury's retrograde in, and it has 2 different aspects. It does 3 times. Mercury makes waning semi-squares to Saturn, and it makes waning semi-sextiles to Saturn. And these are all balsamic phase. The semi-square is the 315-degree aspect moving into balsamic phase. So 6 aspects, Mercury with Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn, emphasizing everything that we've talked about. You know, these aspects don't even show up in your astrology calendars. And yet 6 Mercury Saturn aspects, to me, it's like, whoa, okay, here's the big aspect that this Mercury or aspects of this Mercury retrograde. Here's the biggest thing going on. Yesterday, Capricorn, or tomorrow, Aquarius. Yesterday or tomorrow. How do we make sense of everything that's crumbling in our world? Then how do we pay attention to Saturn and Aquarius, those visionary insights of what's coming? Saturn and Aquarius is going to say, detach, objectify your themes and situations. And then the Cancer polarity will come in here, okay, and go, what's going on for us emotionally? How are we being motivated on emotional levels? Is it in alignment with our own emotional health? Or do we have to make some changes? Are we finding that inner emotional peace? Do we have that inner security? As Mercury and Saturn say, oh, this is changing, that's changing, this is changing, that's changing. So we also will have major reviews, again, of what is considered a standard of right, wrong conduct. Who is creating these standards? Consensus society? Consensus religion? Politicians? Public figures, our parents, our children, our boss, do we agree? Or are we breaking free, Mercury retrograde? And if we have been conditioned Capricorn with certain standards of right, wrong conduct, and we deviate from accepted behaviors and attitudes, we're going to have guilt. And it really will ask us to question, is this conditioned guilt or natural guilt? And the Jeffrey Green teachings of evolutionary astrology state 75 to 80% of guilt is conditioned. Society sets a standard that's not in alignment with natural laws and principles, but we have been so conditioned by it, we feel guilt. This Mercury retrograde is a prime opportunity to break free from these standards of right, wrong, to break free from guilt, and to ask, what's my own individual sense of right, wrong? And if we are wanting to evolve spiritually, to literally say, source, what is right for me in this situation? And source, if I don't agree with this situation, how do I speak up? How do I stand up? How do I work to create a difference in this material world? Now, because Mercury makes 6 of these aspects to Saturn, I put this slide back in here. Listener, you asked the question that I was going to answer with this slide. No worries, though. You asked it when it was appropriate, so we'll just pass over this slide. But can you now see, with Mercury making these 6 aspects to Saturn in this retrograde cycle, just how important these issues with our inner animus is for every single one of us, and how we are all working to balance that regardless of what gender we happen to be in right now? Honor how you feel and find your courage to speak up and act up however it's highest and best for you. Now, Mercury makes waning squares to Chiron, Last quarter squares being those crises and beliefs over how best to move forward in our life. And with Chiron in Aries, initiating independence can be wounded somehow, or it could be in conflict with responsibilities. Mercury in Capricorn, and it can include conditioned or natural guilt around responsibility. What is mine to do and what is not mine to do? And if this is not my responsibility, how can I best break free? How can I stand up for myself and be independent? And Cancer polarity, how do we honor what feels best emotionally versus wanting to mentally override our emotions? Chiron and Aries may not want to slow down and process. It may just want to run over everything. And so that last quarter square is going to create more involution, more depression, more inner reflection. It's what the purpose is. Honor it and allow those emotions to help guide you in what to do and when to do it, and when to speak up and how to speak up. And Mercury is those waning trines with Uranus that we mentioned. And waning trines, as we said before, typically reward aspects provided prior efforts have been made. What have you done the first 240 degrees from Mercury's conjunction with Uranus, spring of 21? So there can be surprises, Uranus, around resources. We can, just have resources show up in our lap, or, the promotion can come the beginning of the year with work. But we can also have unexpected expenses arise too. Try to judge less, discern more. Okay, what does this mean? Star Lady, you're going to love this one. I've been a full-time astrologer for since January 1st, 2000 was when I quit my day job completely. But I was, already working as an astrologer 3-4 days a week, and then took the leap. And yes, I had another income alternative show up when I did that. But 2 decades as an astrologer, I work out of my home. I don't put a lot of miles. I have an 18-year-old little Subaru, and it only has 67,000 miles on it. But guess what? My little car is on its last breaths. I haven't had a car payment in 14, 15 years. And I'm like, oh, okay. Am I going to wait till my car breaks down on the side of the road? Or am I going to do something about it? And so that trine, I can see it, I can sense it. I can just go, okay, I love you, little car. I wanted to go 2 more years. I really wanted to make 20 years with my vehicle, but no, it's not going to happen. So there you go. So we can get major insights around resource values that will pop up into our consciousness. One of the things that I realize is I really don't need to drive a new car off the parking lot. I don't know if I will. I can probably afford the payments, but I don't know if I will. I guess I'll have to see how the used car market is in this supply chain inflation world. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that I have a value system that says I don't need a new car. I need a newer car, and I would like a few more modern amenities on my car. I'll see how that kind of plays itself out through Mercury retrograde. I'm hoping to let my mom had to borrow my car for a month because she had a fender bender, and my mother cannot sit home. She probably put more miles on my car in the last month than I have in the last 2 years. That's just my little Energizer Bunny mother. So I'm hoping to let it sit until all these planets go direct in January and then make my decision. So, conserving resources. How do we reduce, reuse, recycle? Natural time period. What's our monetary goals? How are we redoing our budgets? How are things happening in your world? We thought our washing machine broke down. It didn't. We managed to fix it all by ourselves by unplugging it and plugging it back in. Just giving you examples. Astrologers go through life just like the rest of us. But this whole thing about these trines in Capricorn, Taurus, and what do we value around the material world? Podcast listeners have heard me say this. I thought I'd give you a little visual of it. The US has 4% of the world's population. We consume 25% of the world's resources. Of that 25% of the world's resources, the upper 10% of USA income consumes almost half of those material goods. The USA consumption is unsustainable with the rest of the world. And, Pluto in Capricorn had a lot with its distortions of accumulate, accumulate, accumulate. And as Pluto goes into Aquarius, 3 months, 2.5 months in 23, 8.5 months in 24, and then 2 decades in Aquarius, this is where we're going to have some equalizing of resources and how we look at things, and even simply how we package things. They don't package stuff in the rest of the world like we do in the US. If there's one area where Leroy and I go round and round and round, it's his Scorpio wife and her recycling. He jokes, but I pull things out of the garbage and put them in recycling. Or I take them to, what do you call Habitat Restore? Habitat for Humanity's Restore. Leroy just rolls his eyes, and I go, this is what I'm going to do, Media Monk. This is my value. Get over it. Stay tuned. We're going to watch this come into being a lot more, not just this Mercury retrograde, but the two decades of Pluto and Aquarius. Neptune waning sextile, Mercury waning sextiles to Neptune. So here again, more disillusionment coming through as that momentary sense of satisfaction with something that we've purchased or bought or gotten in the material world, feels good for a moment, and then it goes, and then it's like, all right, what next? What will make me feel better? More stuff or inner peace? This is last quarter phase waning sextiles, 300 degrees. So deep spiritual review on how best to participate in the manifested world. Listening to what feels good inside us on emotional levels. And of course, here's my 2 mantras I created for Neptune and Pisces. What would you have me know, Source? What would you have me do, Source? And asking those questions again, until answers come from inside you and outside, because you've asked and asked. Mercury with the nodes. The South Node is making a waxing sextile to Mercury. The North Node is making waning trines. The South Node, those power over under issues, wanting to have that Capricorn control. The Taurus North Node trines to Mercury, desiring to take charge of our own life in some way. I can do the food, clothing, shelter thing for myself. I can provide for myself. I can provide for my children if I have them. I can participate in the material world as it emotionally makes sense for me. Another theme with the nodes in Taurus, Scorpio is patriarchal suppression of natural sexuality in all its variations will continue to be exposed. And Mercury retrograde in Capricorn is throwing off all of the old patriarchal distortions. But we also have consensus society trying to put everything back into their traditional male-female roles. Don't think consensus society will be successful, but they're going to go, out kicking and screaming, and there will always be subsets of society that, entrench the patriarchal distortions even more harshly for as long as they can get away with it. May evolution take place. So here's Mercury stationary direct on January 18th. And here are the three planets, Mars, Mercury, and Uranus, that go direct in 10 days of each other. Talk about a momentum to take charge of our life and move forward. And when Uranus goes direct, all planets are direct and moving forward for 3 months until Mercury goes retrograde in Taurus next April. So by golly gee, utilize this Mercury retrograde to prioritize your goals, your values, how you want to move forward in this life. And as you get to the middle and end of January, one foot in front of another. And the other thing that's so interesting on the stationary direct chart is it's within hours of the Sun-Pluto conjunction, bring the willpower with to do the things we want to do and, set the new goals and make that effort to do things. And then a few days after that, Venus is going to have a conjunction with Saturn in Aquarius, giving us the visionary energy of this is the way forward. This is the way forward. This is the way forward. In prepping for this, I just thought, my gosh, there's such momentum to really move forward in this new year. Take advantage of it, however it is presenting itself to you in your life. Now here's Mercury stationary direct with the 1KC July 4th chart. And I look at the fact that Mercury is going stationary direct at 8 Capricorn, 8 minutes, exactly on the USA Eris at 8 Capricorn, 8 minutes. Talk about the USA getting off to a feisty start. I just see the House of Representatives just really battling away in January and frustrating those that pay attention to politics and those that don't, rolling their eyes and just going, can we send these guys off to a deserted island and forget about them? Stay tuned. I do think, again, one more time with the third Saturn conjunction, and I think the Venus Saturn conjunction will probably take place at 25, maybe 26 degrees. Aquarius is still within a few degrees of the Casey July 4th moon. Public will increasingly demand fairness and common sense from our politicians. We'll see how that happens. But first of all, I think we're going to really have to get through a fair amount of divisiveness, extremism, outrageousness. Most of the thought of the USA midterms was that voters turned away from the extremism of the Republican Party. I don't know if we're going to see that extremism in the Republican Party go away real soon. The 2024 USA presidential election will take place with Pluto back in Capricorn. I think the public will continue to say no to that extremism, but I think we will see more of it before the Republican Party kind of goes, okay, enough of this. You know, on the Democratic side, the Democrats aren't any better with their elitism. You know, if you're familiar with a group called Public Citizen, they are probably the nonprofit organization on a national level that is most directly involved with trying to overturn Citizens United, the Supreme Court decision back in 2012 that allowed all of the dark money and super PACs to come into the USA elections. I think Pluto and Aquarius may see a growing demand to have more fairness and equality in the US elections and to take the ridiculous amounts of money that is being spent on elections and maybe put them towards social support systems or public infrastructure. I'll get off my wagon. So, closing, how do I prioritize what is important in my life? How do I listen emotionally, both inwardly and outwardly? How do I develop more direct communications? How can I improve my familial and work relationships? How do I participate as a social being on planet Earth? What are my 2023 goals? What is my plan of action in 2023? All right, here, oops, I forgot to set a date. I did set a date for that. Hold on, I'll change that. It's going to be April 19th. Let's go to the next slide. Here are future webinars. I'm going to do a Saturn in Pisces in March, the Mercury retrograde in Taurus, and of course Jupiter's going to go in Taurus. The nodal axis is going to change signs. I haven't quite decided how to address Pluto in Aquarius yet. That's why it's not quite listed. I think I'm probably going to end up doing a part 1 in 2023 and a part 2 in 2024. Sometimes I've even thought about maybe doing a live event with Pluto and Aquarius, a workshop or something. Just thoughts in my head, feedback. I will be at NORWAC out in Seattle this May. I'll do a evolutionary chart interpretation example lecture, but the lecture that I'm excited about is the Great Ingress Decade. Pluto in Aquarius, Neptune in Aries, Uranus in Gemini, and Chiron in Taurus. The 4 outer planets are all changing signs this decade. Okay, so one more time, if you want to participate in the annual forecast live or get everything afterwards, here's the hyperlink for the forecasting webinars where you can go find it. And then finally, I always like to list every aspect that I put in the webinar for you in a chronological order in case you like to follow it. And so here's that chronological order for you. Last slide. Any comments or questions from anybody?
Nope, we're pretty clear, Kim. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Go forward, full steam ahead by the end of January. Set your goals, determine your values, make your plan of action, and may the universe co-create with you. Thank you, everyone.